Hey, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of for the last week. We have an excellent show happening today. We've got Wes Spencer joining us here in a little bit. We're going to talk about what happens when we stop paying all those ransoms. What is the cyber criminals' next step? But before that, let me do some housekeeping. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, interact with us in the chat. We'd love to hear from you live. Don't forget to sign up for Pax8 Beyond, and definitely make sure you catch the game next week because we have a very special episode coming where we're going to talk about the new security track coming to Pax8 Beyond. You're not going to want to miss that one. With that, let's dive straight into the news. What's happening, Matt?
Boy, Dom, you hit the nail on the head. I actually just got the final preview of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Nobody's done this. It's going to be awesome.
It's gonna be wild.
I don't want to give away too much, but join us next week. We're really going to dig deep into it. It's going to be pretty cool. So I'm excited about it. Well, let's get into the news, y'all. I'm glad to have you back. Thanks for being here. But let's dig into the first one, right? I'll start us off with an unfortunate one. The ABA has had a breach that has hit 1.4 million members, right? So this is every attorney, every person that's ever registered with the American Bar Association, of which you must be a member in order to actually function as an attorney. So this is a pretty big one. And what's I think unique about this is the ABA has been saying to their attorney bodies and to the constituent bar associations around the country a lot of real guidance. I mean, since I was a practitioner, even 2017 and 18, you were getting guidance in the ABA for, hey, protect your stuff. Hey, you have a lot of case data. Hey, you have a lot of PHI. Hey, you have a lot of PII. You have a lot of information that's very, very valuable. And yet they find themselves in this position. So what exactly we see here, Dom? Did they get the keys to the kingdom? What all did they grab in this one?
I think it's still a little blurry, but it's basically member profile information for every bar member, right? Which, as you mentioned, essentially every attorney is a member of the American Bar Association,
Right. Yeah.
at
By
least by
definition.
extension of their state bar association,
Yeah.
right? So,
Right.
it's a massive incident, and I think we have to. Right, the bar association has been at this for years with regards to what attorneys, and they're often overlooked in the
Uh-oh.
channel, right? People don't realize the level of data constantly being handled by attorneys' offices, whether it's pending litigation
Yep.
or just general attorney-client information. It's its own category of information and needs to be handled accordingly.
You know what's funny is I think Dom's made Teapot angry again. You really got to stop poking the
really
guy in
coming at
Britain.
me,
You know
I
he's
know.
he's really coming hard in the paint
Not
right
my
now.
fault.
So
I didn't pick his name.
I digress. But no, seriously though, the challenge with this is you now have most of these people's passwords salted and hashed, right? Granted, they're not cracked yet. They're not direct passwords. We don't have that. There is some degree of protection on the passwords. But once those hashes are obtained and once those exist, there could be enough enumeration, password injection of actual separate accounts, things that help break that down, or just raw math and brute forcing against those over time. And ultimately, they may crack those. And I think the question I'd ask if I have any attorney clients, which I think a lot of people watching do, is, how often do they reuse that password? I would actually maybe take it as an understanding of action to go say, hey, let's see what password you were using at your ABA and your password manager, hopefully. And let's go ahead and ensure that we're using that password nowhere else, right? And if so, let's get it changed.
They've got time. They're hashed and salted. It's gonna if they assuming they do brute force them, you've got time to go take action before, unless they're really bad passwords, which is entirely possible in the legal space.
Yeah, and Tyler, I saw somebody in chat. I'm going to be cracking this password database, hopefully, to see if I can get Tyler Royert's password, our attorney. Ruert? I messed that up. Tell me how to say it again. Rowert. Dang it. He told me 10 times. Sorry, Tyler. I love you. But anyways, yeah, so that we'll wait and see what comes of this. But if you have attorney clients, it would at least be something to educate them and say, hey, listen, you're not directly compromised here potentially. There may be some PII information about your practice, but really it's that password that we want to really focus in on right now. And are you using this anywhere else from that perspective? Okay, let's move on to the next article. We now actually have one where, listen, they asked for a cyber force. And Dom, do you have anything to say about this particular article?
It's always entertaining, and I think the first thing I thought of was Space Force.
Sure,
and
totally.
how we made space cadets or whatever they're called. And my point with making that joke is the way that went down is they went to sleep airmen in the Air Force and they woke up in the Space Force. And I think if a cyber branch were to materialize, some people will go to sleep soldiers or airmen or sailors and wake up and be cyber people, right? I do see the idea here, but with the understanding that Cyber Command is very much staffed by all the branches, and that's how the DoD has structured this. Personally, I think there's a benefit to having the unique personalities that come out of each branch of the military, and it also allows them to have components that are attached to things like JSOC for those missions. Um, so I don't really know how to react to this. And if as someone who knows the Army well, if I really peel this back, I think there's also an element here to it's very hard to find a large volume of nerds who can meet physical standards and deployment readiness requirements and be a hacker, right? So for
Hey,
me,
man,
if I
listen, you
tried to
poking
peel all
fun
the
at my
onion
size
layers back,
38 waist with overlap? Is that what we're
I'm
talking
poking
about
fun of
here? It's not very
myself too.
nice.
Don't you worry. But I do think
Fair,
if
fair.
U.S. cyber force were to happen, there would be drastically different standards of physical fitness compared to other combat commands.
That is fair. They talk about it as the pressures increased in the National Defense Authorization Act, stating, listen, it has, we see that modern threats are significant, dynamic, and ever present and consequential. And then further on to say they can no longer be addressed in a hodgepodge fashion, according to MCPA. So I think the call to action on this really is more, we can't keep doing everything in a silo. We can't keep herding cats. We can't keep taking information sets that are destined for the Air Force to be functional differently for the Army, differently for DoD, all
Well,
those things. So
if you really
yeah.
dig into it too, there's been issues in Cyber Command in terms of like the Navy recently had an issue with the ability to build a cyber force strong enough to meet its commitments to Cyber Command. And Cyber Command is a joint combat command. And if you're not familiar with that, it means it is essentially one unit in the military that is staffed with people from different branches. And one of the biggest challenges I think that Cyber Command has is that the commanding officer of that particular command changes between branches. So you get an Army officer style of command for a few years, and you get an Air Force officer style command for a few years, and the enlisted men hate that. The enlisted folk, right?
Yeah,
Like it's drastic
fair.
changes in leadership policy. So this could be a good thing, but understand I think a cyber force would just be staffed out of people who go to bed in one branch and wake up in the other, and are
Yeah,
suddenly
yeah, fair.
subject to a different set
And you
of
you did
standards.
see some of this, right? Last year, there was a change to the policy for people applying to be in certain MOSs, that allowed for different ages, potentially different,
Yeah.
personal physical fitness categories and things in that way. So I think you've already seen evidence of exactly what you're saying from that perspective. But anyways, won't dwell on this too much. Just wanted everybody to know this is something that's being discussed, and it really goes and speaks towards the threat of today, and what we're seeing is ever evolving, and sometimes we can't keep evolving in a vacuum as a separate entities like we do in our warfare today. So all right, last one, let's get into this real quick because this really sets the stage for what we're talking about. This is a little older. I really brought it back up. It's from January 20th this year, but it's really Coveware. And if anybody isn't aware, Coveware was the company that did my negotiation personally for our loss and did the negotiation with those ransomware threat actors. And Coveware is kind of the de facto kind of finger on the pulse for this. They've been surfacing this data for quite a while. But Coveware says that it's going down. In that first graph, you see the red dropping and the blue going up. You see less payments of ransomware out to threat actors and more times where the threat and the incident is just simply recorded, restored, and moved forward, which means that there was either no breach, there was no benefit in paying, they had good backups, they had things to protect them, they had other compensating controls such as encryption, things like that that allowed this to continue to shift that trend down. And we're going to talk about this a little bit with our special guest, with Wes Spencer here in a little bit. But let's dig into that, Dom. What did you see in this Coveware report? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think, like you said, this is a little older. I think it shows progress, right? And West actually did an episode on Empath a while back, celebrating that progress and that we've driven these ransom payments down, right? And that's fantastic. We've been wanting to do that for a long time. And when that started to happen, we saw the pivot into the double extortion model, right? If I'm going to release the data, and really what brought this
Yep.
episode to light was, can we explore what happens when threat actors get angry that they're not getting paid anymore, right? What's their next move? Because these are criminal organizations, they're businesses at the end of the day, and they want to continue to get paid. So it'll be really interesting to analyze the flip side of this. But I think it's really important to recognize the success that is driving down ransom payments.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't want to miss out on that. Let's all stand up and do a little bit of a clap that it seems like everybody that's here
The
that's
golf clap.
driving this forward is winning. Yes, we'll do a little golf clap. Yes, of course. It's wonderful, right? Yeah, of course. Yes. But the thing is, we are winning. We are starting to change the tide. We are absolutely starting to roll tide, if you will. Sorry about that. I saw that in the chat there, Wes. I figured I'd help you out with it for David Powell. But the point is, we are changing the tide, if you will, and you are seeing people. I mean, just look at it, this Dom, look 2 years ago when we started preaching this stuff really loudly, the level of sophistication of the MSPs and the conversations we're having are significantly deeper, significantly higher level of understanding, and a
Right.
significant level of all of us in it to try to save and change this. And if you look at the graph, it shows it. Right? I mean, there's a reason Datto grew to be where Datto was. There's a reason backup providers are making a killing and doing a good job, is we're actually enabling and empowering ourselves to not necessarily have to pay the ransom for that purpose, right? And so, David Powell. Anyways, yeah. So, but the point is, I really think that's why we wanted to bring this episode in specifically and bring in Wes Spencer to talk about this. Is the insurance companies are seeing it, and he's actually got a report he wants to go through and talk about a little bit that's really going to set this in. But everybody out there that's doing this job and working to play the game, as Dom and I have defined it, kudos to you. We are changing the tide and winning. So I won't dwell on it too much, Dom, but I think we can kick over to the illustrious and amazing Robin Harris for her thoughts on automation and templatization.
So I want to tell you, this is my confession. I am a lazy compliance person. And if I don't have to start something from scratch, I'm not going to start it from. I love templates. I love them. And apparently I'm not the only one in the space that loves templates. Because if you do Google and search for policy templates, risk assessment templates, security questionnaire templates, there's just all kinds of templates out there. And you want to find a good, reliable source for templates and just kind of look at them and assess, does this template give me enough of a starting point to work with? But I love templates. And it also provides some, if you'll notice, like with policy templates, you will notice that if you look at all kinds of templates across different industries or whatever, there's a certain kind of language and there's a certain kind of scoping that is probably part of our industry thinking when we think of what does a BYOD, bring your own device template, look like? What does an end user computer policy look like? What does an acceptable use policy look like? What we are doing is we're actually tapping into the expertise of other people who've done the work already, and basically they're sharing their expertise liberally with others when they share templates. Now, there's an organization called SANS Institute that actually has like an entire list of security policy templates. There's a GRC platform. There are GRC platforms that you can go to their website and or your email address. They will share all of these wonderful templates with you. And so it's a good idea to just do some template shopping to see what is the industry saying is important in this space of like BYOD or acceptable use, because you'll see these people are actually thinking ahead of, okay, the industry has changed. We're going to have a BYOD policy 10, 15 years ago. That just wasn't a thing of letting employees bring their own devices to work and use them instead of company-provided devices. So I'm going to suggest that you take some time, and anytime you have to produce some type of a deliverable, like a document or something like that, Go and see if there are templates out there that can help shortcut your process.
I before we get started on this, Robin Harris kind of triggered me on something that I wanted to talk about, which is templatization, automation, repeatability, defensibility, and the things that are going to mean so very much as the future continues to unfold are all empowered by the templatization ability that we're starting to see, right? We now see that I can write the same API script and manage something in Microsoft, and the same thing for Dell, and the same thing for this, and the same thing for that, in ways that I can repeat that over and over again, and that my templates can now extend even deeper and deeper and deeper into my operations and tactical, technical componentry. So, don't miss that. I really want to really just poignantly say, Robin Harris has got it on this. Those templates will really matter, and having that is huge. So, any thoughts on that, Dom, before we introduce our amazing guest for the second time on this show?
Robots only make the mistakes you tell them to, right? So you only have to succeed once if you automate it. So if you can automate it, automate it.
Yeah, and if it breaks once and you start seeing robots plop off in the ocean, you can change the firmware and all of them stop plopping off on the ocean accidentally, right? So you get to fix it in that regard. But anyways, without further ado, what we wanted to bring in, Wes, you've been on the show before. Wes is a noted, I don't like it when anybody ever calls me an expert, but I would say Wes is an expert student in a great many fields of study and is brilliant. And so we always like to have those type of people on to talk through this. But Wes, if you want to introduce yourself and talk about what you're doing these days, and then we'll get right into the subject matter, brother.
Yeah, right on. So I'm second time on the game. That's super cool. I am lucky to be with you guys. Thank you for the invite. Really good to be with you guys. So yeah, let's see. I'm a cybersecurity guy, have been pretty much all my career, and the vice president and channel chief at FifthWall Solutions. So just helping MSP partners in their cybersecurity insurance journey, which we're going to talk about today. And then also the founder and CEO of Empath Cyber, which is really cool platform, sort of my labor of love for MSPs, helping them grow in their security journey. So, man, Matt, Dom, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming, man.
It's always awesome, man. It's always awesome. Dom, we talked about this before, but what's the premise? We're stopping paying cyber criminals, right? We're seeing that evidence play out. What are we seeing play out? And then we'll go to you, Wes, to actually give us a little deeper insight on this. But Dom, what are we seeing?
Well, again, I don't want to skip over the success, right? Driving down ransomware payments is huge. It's one of those things, we driven down ransomware payments a lot, which I would celebrate more so than we've only driven up Microsoft MFA 1% in 2 years. Right? So we're making more progress in the ransom. I had
There's no BEC number plugged into this number, right? This is not encompassing of business email compromise type incidents in the shift.
We have made a lot of progress, but here on the game, we tend to talk a lot about the bad guys and maybe too much. But at the end of the day, bad guys are going to bad guy, right? And we started to see some articles come out about, frankly, sort of an increase in the criminal layer of this and the brutality of some of these cyber attacks, and sometimes in just terrifying ways, but really in general, just sort of the evolution of double extortion type attacks is coming to fruition. And I think that's a reaction to they're not getting paid as much in the traditional ransomware space. So we need another way to extract currency, right?
Yep, 100%. Wes, you've got a really good article that's pretty well timed. I think it's quite nascent, but it's really speaking towards a couple of the things and the whys and the trends and what we're actually seeing. And it's actually another positive, I think, in some ways. But let's tap into that, Wes. Go take us down this road.
You got it, Matt. So first of all, it comes from Fitch Ratings, and Fitch does pretty much all of the tracking in cyber insurance and just the insurance market as a whole. So it's definitely like a source of truth that I think is pretty interesting. And so we've been tracking this for the past few years, looking at what's happening in the cyber insurance market. And when you look at what the latest report has got to show, and keep in mind, this is like days old, like it's brand new, and it's got all of the culmination of last year's data. And what we're seeing is, for the very first time, you are seeing loss ratios come down in a significant way. And I'll define what that means in a second. But we had been predicting that loss ratios would continue to slide downward. We're going to talk about kind of why that is, because it goes part and parcel of this conversation. But I don't think any of us expected it to be as drastic a reduction as it as it was, which is great news. So here's what loss ratios are. It's really simple. It's like one of the only metrics that insurance care about. So for every dollar I bring in insurance, how many pennies leak out the back door to losses and other
Yep.
costs? And so generally speaking, a good loss ratio in cyber insurance, really any line of insurance, should be about 15%. So the fact that we were in the 70s a few years ago was egregiously bad. And hear me, 42% where we're at now is still not great. But when you look at that reduction of where it was even a year ago and 2 years ago, it's way, way, way better. And so, what does that mean? Well, it means a couple different things. It means that we're getting some consistency back into the market. It means the reduction of the number of claims that are happening and the damages in those claims. So both of those are coming down, which is, I mean, that's a great thing. It shows that control effectiveness is working. It's showing that, for the first time we say, people say all the time, Matt and Dom, like, you're asking me to pay all this money. Why? Like, how can you prove to me that security is doing something for me? Well, this isn't definitive 100% all in proof on this, but it absolutely paints the picture that control
Yeah.
effectiveness and cyber maturity pulls these things down, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And if you think about it, what kind of goes into a claim is, do I have to pay the ransom? Yes or no? We're seeing that line drop with Coveware. So that's obviously playing a factor into this, which means the controls are effective.
Yep.
But on the other side of it, insurance companies, started a fight 2 years ago, right? Or almost three now, where they said, hey, let's see, we want MFA on every switch, and they just were really grasping at straws. And it was an unplanned shotgun approach to how they would then matriculate out a classes of insureds and actuarial data, right? That's kind of the way it played out. But now we're seeing where the actuarial data is getting better. They're actually asking better questions. They're actually asking 16 pages of questions now. And so I have to imagine the other outcome of this is simple non-renewal of more risky policies. So I don't know that that is completely going away. It may absolutely be uninsured losses too as part of this, right? And as part of that negotiated ransomware in different ways. But I do think that this is really a positive thing that we are seeing people stop paying. And I think we have seen an impact in the threat actors landscape. Wes, before we got going with the show, you were kind of touching on a little bit of the tradecraft challenge reasons why a lot of these threat actor gangs aren't playing a factor. But it also may speak to why we're seeing more from North Korea and why we're seeing more from other nation state players not involved in this. Do you want to touch us in a little bit of that, Wes, and help the audience
Yeah.
understand that?
If you notice from 2020 to 2021, there was a slight drop in loss ratio, just a few percentage points, nothing major. And also Coveware, that was the same time. So I'm with you. I love Coveware. Like, some of their data is absolutely the best that's out there because they're
Yeah.
so close to the ground source truth of what's happening in these payments, because they facilitate the vast majority of them. And so we saw the same thing. Coveware was the first one to say this, of like, we are seeing a reduction in early 2021 around like
that
the
guy checked
actual
his
volume
data
going down.
9 times, right?
Oh,
Like, that
it,
guy looked
right?
at the data and goes, is it upside down? Did I
Can
put the
this
numbers in an inverse? What's
Yes.
sorry.
And
But
yeah, and
continue.
no, to your point, one of the things they said in that report was, look, the reason we think some of this is happening is the volume's going down because we are seeing a shift in tactics. These same
Yep.
financially motivated e-crime actors are now attached to a physical kinetic war. And so for the first time, we're seeing, what is cyber warfare actually equivalent to in a kinetic physical war? We're seeing the two go hand in hand. And so, and you actually see this, a lot of these threat actors
Yeah.
are now doing things like they're not going after ransoms, it's smash and grab. So how can we hit Ukrainian assets and literally just shut them offline? We don't care about the money at this point. And so
Yeah,
of
you had
course
several
eyes are
killer
going elsewhere.
Trojans. Yeah, you had several killer
And that's
Trojans out
that's
there that would just take out the
fascinating
machine.
and terrifying at the same time, right? And we've always speculated about critical infrastructure or intelligence grab attacks. And intelligence grab attacks are a Tuesday in any modern nation, right?
Yeah,
Like, it is.
Sure.
Like, we all spy on each other. If you didn't know, now you know it's a thing, right?
Yeah, the big shocker today from Dom Kirby. You heard it here. Yeah.
But in general, I think for me, again, it's fascinating because I'm just a nerd for this kind of stuff. But it's also terrifying. We're seeing what we used to like think about, like what happens in war, suddenly come to fruition, where you have two nation states genuinely attacking each other. But for me, what I didn't anticipate was the surrounding geopolitical instability, and now other nation states using this war as a scapegoat to do other attacks, right? And we saw leaks come out of the U.S. government, which was obviously an internal issue, but we're also seeing increased activity out of DPRK out of China
Yep.
and out of other nations that have that sophisticated cyber capability.
Yep. For sure.
A couple other
So
things I want to
yeah, go ahead.
pull out of this too, if I could, super quickly, is we are seeing changes here, right? We've also seen several states here in the U.S. that now, if you're like a state organization like Florida does this where I live, you can't pay ransoms anymore. If you're state
Right.
funded or state driven, you can't pay ransoms. And
Yeah.
also at Right of Boom, we heard from CISA director, and one of the things he was talking about was he feels like, and I don't disagree with this, being in the industry, that the insurance companies, the fact that they will reimburse ransoms doesn't help in this situation, right? And I,
Sure.
I have to wonder, I'm curious, Matt, what you think, and Dom, is it if we see an outcome in which finally we see the carrier say, look, we're going to cover a ransomware attack as long as you're eligible, but we're not going to cover the ransomware payment. I wonder if
Yeah.
that sort of
Yeah.
shifts and continues to bring down
I
these
think
payments. I'm curious what
I
that would happen
do.
there.
I do. I think two ways, right? I think there's the first way of we're saying we're going to deal with the breach counsel. We're going to deal with the digital forensics. We're going to deal with all the things you can restore, and we're going to have breach counsel. We'll pay for those breach notifications, but we're not funding the threat actor. There's two things. Number one, it means that you have some degree of co-insurance already understood, that you have no understanding of what that number could be. But secondarily, it brings it back to a revenue-based loss. Right now, we've seen evidence of threat actors asking for the exact number that was in the premium
Oh,
for
dude,
that
they steal the
insurance
premium
product.
off the shared drive.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they just
yeah, they know exactly what the coverage is, and they're taking whatever those policy limits are from that coverage. And so now you're going to have to go, well, can they pay it? And that's a much different world, right? It's still something that's a challenge, but I think that's a smart move. I think removing ransomware payment coverage from insurance is a better choice than a lot of the warranty methodologies that are being done in subrogation and loss and things like that. I'd rather see you not being sued for a ransomware payment that went to a company or to a threat actor. So in my opinion, I think, Wes, it's a brilliant call out. I do want to touch back in on something that was said a little bit earlier about this pivot into different types of ways of extracting money. And you're seeing that play out even in common ways, right? Like, look at the rise of business email compromise. For everybody that's not familiar, business email compromise is a different way of exfilling the money. I'm now going to go and trick Dom into changing his ACH instructions. And what does ACH actually stand for? Do we have an acronym
Automated
problem? What is
clearinghouse.
ACH?
Automated,
Thank you.
automated
Automated
clearinghouse.
clearinghouse. Yeah, so we have an ACH. Oh, I knew the banker Wes would know it. I'm a banker too. I should shut up and not tell on myself how dumb I am. It's okay. I still love me. But the point is that they're now tricking Dom into changing his wire instructions or his ACH instructions and sending it to the threat actor now in a way that can be exfilled by money mules, can be exfilled via quick wire transfers to other places where it could convert into the monetary system of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
I actually
But you're
just
starting to
had
see a
this
different way.
because it just came up because in my role, I manage relationships with a couple of vendors for our services. And a particular vendor of ours, I won't say who, was exposed to SVB. So they obviously
Yep.
did some Swift banking changes. And I got that weird
Mhm.
email, and I
You
called
made
three
a
different
Swift
people.
joke there.
I
Sorry.
did make a Swift
I'm
joke,
sorry.
yes. Not on purpose though. But I made 3 different phone calls to people who I knew just to be sure, because I live in that space of I've seen so much BEC that I'm just, in case
Yeah.
the first 2 people were AI scams, the third person's gonna lock it in for me before I send this to finance.
Yeah. But what
So,
if it got different and worse? Go ahead, Wes.
you know what I'd love to see happen? If you do Google searches for things like what's the iteration after ransomware, like you don't get many results.
Sure.
People aren't talking about this.
Right.
But I do wonder if there's a physical corollary that I wonder if we'll see something similar happen, which is look at piracy off the coast of Somalia. You remember that really awesome
Okay.
Tom Hanks movie, Captain Phillips?
I am
Yeah.
the
One of the
captain
things-
now. Yeah. Got
Yes,
you.
look at me, look at me. Yes, absolutely love that movie. Still watch it like once a year.
I
It's
would
just
never be able to
awesome.
look at him. There's always going to be one
Right?
eye pointing somewhere else. Like I would just die as a victim in that one, right? Dude, I'd have to like cover an eye and be like, I am looking at you.
What are you
Anyways, I
talking
digress.
about, man?
Sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you threw me off, but I love it. So one of the things that they've done is they've like, you know what? We just put armed guards on these ships. And because these ships are super stable because they're so big, I mean, we can just keep the pirates at bay very easily, and that's what they've done. And if you look, the amount of piracy that's happening off the coast of Somalia has dropped to almost non-existence now. We've just
Sure.
pushed it into where it doesn't work anymore. And you have to
Yeah.
wonder if we could ever get that to that direction to where can we push e-crime in payments like this to the levels of Somalia piracy. You just wonder what it would take
Yeah.
to get to that stage.
Well,
About 9 years
think,
in my
right?
thought.
And we're talking about, insurance companies not paying ransoms, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I think initially it doesn't help, but ultimately I think the ransoms come down because threat actors realize they don't have $1 million anymore, right? There's no golden
Yeah.
parachute of an insurance policy. And I think if you
Agreed.
keep pushing on that pressure point and knocking the ransom potential down, well, now there's no revenue for the bad guy, right? And it suddenly is a waste of their time. And remember, a lot of these, not all of them, but a lot of these ransomware crews are funding something else, right? Like
Yep.
DPRK only does ransomware so that they could fund all their other cyber madness, and it's often led into
And
other
and I
criminal funding.
I have a unique path this could take. I actually went and did ChatGPT, and we'll get into that
Oh,
in a
I
minute
did
if
the
we
same
have time.
thing.
There's some really good stuff. But I actually have one that you could think of. There was, for the first time ever, and Wes, I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but there was, for the first time ever, a commercial use of malware that's in proven history, right? You have the company in China that that has the competing app to Alibaba that is also on the news during the Super Bowl. That was the Temu app, I think is what it was called, and it was the Shop Like a
Yes.
Billionaire one. That company was caught by Lookout and a couple of other players using the same 0 days in the NSO group stuff against Apple iPhones and against Android phones embedded in their software in their app, so that when you installed the app, it would actually go in, and instead of this being a ransom or instead of this being an attack against that person, it simply said, you can't take this app off now. It uninstalled Alibaba. It uninstalled the competitors. It wouldn't let the ads come up for the competitors. It injected information in the ads about it. So you could actually see a pivot of this
Wow.
capability and a pivot of these techniques shifting into abusive business practices, right? Like actual commercial gain of income. I mean, I'm taking a little
Well,
hyperbole here,
corporate
but
espionage
yeah,
too is going to be a never-ending issue,
yeah, for
right?
sure. Yeah. So
Do you guys
ChatGPT came up
remember
with, yeah, go ahead,
You may
Wes.
remember those days when Sony had their like DRM stuff installed on their CDs, and so you'd pop
Uh-huh.
the CD, the music
Oh,
CD into your
yes.
computer, and then it would
Yep.
actually install
Ah,
basically malware DRM stuff, right? And
Yeah.
actually, I'm friends with one of the folks that actually allegedly, I should say, hacked Sony, and
Allegedly.
it really
Yeah.
came over
allegedly.
LulzSec, and it came over that was the issue that really pushed them to go after Sony.
Yeah, yeah, was that piece of it. I think I think at OpenAI, because you have to remember this OpenAI ChatGPT 3 is still on 2021 data. It says it's difficult to predict with certainty the next major threats, but cryptojacking, AI powered attacks, IoT attacks, which I'll hone in on in here in a second, and supply chain attacks are all very viable paths for conversion of ransomware events.
That's funny. I
And
got
I think
different
that's
answers
right.
though.
Yeah. Oh,
Funny.
did
So
you? They're
mine
A/B
mine
testing us,
predicted
Dom.
it is old, but mine predicted double extortion ransomware, which we're in that phase,
Yep.
right? AI powered ransomware, which I think we're probably in that phase if we don't know it yet.
Eh,
Ransomware as a
eh,
service,
yeah,
which in 2021 is a fair prediction, and we're definitely in that
def.
phase. And then IoT ransomware. That's another big one.
Yeah.
Can
And
we
here's where
can
we
we
get
talk
into
about
that.
crypto jacking for a minute though? Because Matt
Yeah,
had
that's your
mentioned that, and
specialty. Yeah,
well, I'm
you're there.
curious to know what Pax's position is on this, like what your insights are into this, not your position, your insights, because I'm hearing from more and more folks that like those that like just spin up Azure instances and they haven't properly protected them
Oh my
and they don't
God.
have any kind of like, cost control, and all of a sudden they're hit with
Oh,
something gets in, and now they've had crypto jacking to like extreme levels and 40,
millions.
$50,000 in bills and all this.
Yeah,
Like I do wonder
we've
if
seen
that's
it.
starting to pick up more.
It is. That's a great call out, Wes. So let's talk about this. It's actually called Azure Abusive Consumption. AWS has a different term for it, but it's essentially Azure fraud. And it's something where it really is insidious for the MSP specifically because they hold the contract with us. We hold the contract with Microsoft, and their customer holds the contract with them. And the challenge becomes that this resource gets popped at the customer level. Let's say they had a developer that didn't want that hassle of strong MFA and didn't want that hassle of having those controls in place. It just wants a sandbox. And the threat actor goes in and spins up resources in the millions of dollars or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of NV series in machines in Azure and uses them for compute for a different type of cryptojacking where they're stealing Azure's power, Azure's compute, your dollar bill, your compute, and using that to create crypto mining capabilities, right? Compute resources for mining crypto. So it's a different form of it, but you're 100% right, Wes. We've seen a massive uptick in that. I've heard of MSPs that are out in the wild. I do a lot of work in consulting that are no longer MSPs, and their companies that they were supporting are no longer companies they were supporting out of that type of an attack. So I think that's a prescient one called out as an expansion on traditional crypto jacking. You also are starting to see things, I think, that'll come in that token theft, identity theft, asset extraction more and more. Look at Linus Tech Tips a few weeks ago, right? Look at those type of things where if I can just steal your identity, then you don't have enough security controls in place to actually stop me from taking all the assets. You don't have stop gates or more advanced things in place. And so I think that's one. The other one I think that really stands out is, and you hit on this a little bit, Dom, but look at the application after the Ring breach just recently. I think that's made public news now. But after that Ring compromise, they were doing swatting. They were taking the information and creating swatting, right? And so you could imagine what that looks like of, hey, I just want you to know for $500, Dom, I will not swat your house. What do you mean?
Right.
Well, hey, listen, I'm going to call from your Ring and send a 911. Like you could do that and extort people, right? And I'll pull my Ring out. Well, great. Then next time you plug it back in, I'm going to do it anyway. You're going to have to,
Right.
but you could
Well,
see
and
a lot of these shifts. Yeah.
the other classic example is the connected access control systems, where I could lock you in or out
Oh,
of a building
yeah.
and extort you
Yeah.
that way.
Sam and I and you were talking about that, right? Sam from
Yeah.
CISA,
And
the Region 7 cybersecurity advisor, my friend. Sam was saying, CISA's concern is that we start seeing OT type of attacks, right? Where the ransom is now, hey, if you want your assembly line to keep moving, that belt, you're going to need to pay us right now or that belt don't move. Well, the firmware is jacked. We can go back and restore the firmware. Great. I'm going to do it again because I'm still in your network. You
right.
haven't eradicated me. I'm going to take it out.
Right.
You're going to lose it again. Or even if you saw with the disruption of Facebook and Twitter, when both of them had compromises. Now, they weren't threat actors, but they were locked out of their buildings. They could not go in. They were stuck, I think, for a good number of hours, so much that both organizations canceled work essentially for anybody that couldn't make it in the office that didn't have external remote resources. So, you can imagine that there's other ways to extract ransom than just the traditional, I'm going to encrypt your machine. And I think that's one of the things that we could postulate on a bit. Wes, do you have anything to add on that? Like other
I,
creative thoughts of what you could lock out if you
something
were
you
attacking a bank or anybody?
Yes, something you made me think of on that, Matt, is my son and I just did a tour of the Corvette factory where they make Corvettes.
Sure.
Super cool.
Oh,
We
that's
loved it. We
cool.
did that last year or
That's
last week,
epic.
and yeah, it was super cool. One of the things they talked about was supply chain for them and just how important that just in
Mhm.
time is for them. And they
Yep.
said anytime our factory is out and we're not operational because of logistics problems, power problems. We can't get some part in time, whatever, which they've gone, all these factories have gone through this from the pandemic.
Oh
It
yeah,
costs
for
them
sure.
$128,000 a second is what it costs them for
Oh my
outage time.
God.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so he said, what do we do? Well,
So
we're
yeah.
Chevy. So we have the ability to push to our suppliers. If you cause the outage, we're fining you that
Yep.
loss. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that come in fines that they just
Yeah.
levy. And what's what
A
the supplier
second.
going to do? And so this does push this whole element of like, what's going to happen when we know that you're a strategic partner to X, Y, and Z upstream or downstream to you, and you
Oh,
better
great
pay
call out.
because you're going to get a huge fine yourself. And so, yeah, you just wonder these things are a real thing.
Or even more, what if downstream supplier doesn't have the capacitance to pay that level of what the interruption is going to be? That now may be, hey, we popped a downstream supplier. You need to pay their ransom or else you're not getting these
Right.
parts. They're the only one that can bring you molybdenum pressed into 0.27-inch quarter sheets, right? That, whatever it may be. I don't even know if it's molybdenum's used. I just wanted
Someone
to
needs
say
to
it like
ding
it
that
felt
word because I don't
fancy.
know what
Yeah.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
did you
Yes.
say?
yeah. It's a
Honorary
metal
acronym on that
element.
one.
Yeah. It's MB, I think is its scientific term. But anyways, but the point being is, you have one of those very hot streak items that needs to exist. You could pressure potentially the upstream provider into paying the downstream provider's ransom just to keep the parts going and fine them for it potentially. There's all kinds of interesting things. Imagine your HVAC was turned up to 140 and locked out, and it's only ever obviously going to grow to about 92, but you're not going to be using that office facility. You're right. What if you're in a controlled chemical environment and that HVAC's messed with, and now you can't process plates on aircraft stuff? You can't do your dips because the temperatures aren't right. What if the programmable logic controllers were held hostage? And so you start seeing a lot of the ways that I would attack you
But
from
it
just
expands
pivoting
beyond
into other
financial
ways to make you
motivation.
pay.
And I
Yeah.
think the reason OT is, well, one of the reasons OT is such a massive concern is the terrorism angle, right? We've seen growth in
Oh my
cyber-based
gosh.
terrorism. Like, let's take the access control thing and flip it on its head. What if I just lock you in the building and start opening up gas valves, right? So
Yeah.
there's a ton of risk that comes with OT. And I think if I'm a commercial sort of bad guy cyber operator and I can't get money from ransoms, well, if someone else is going to hire me to do something crazy like that and I need revenue, I'm already
Yeah.
a criminal, right? So what's going to stop me from taking on those sorts of engagements that have,
Yep.
or the Florida water incident?
Yep.
There's huge pushback right now against the EPA and their proposed new regulations
Did you
for
see,
public
and I
water
have not
systems.
validated this is tangential, but the
Yeah,
Florida water system was an insider threat at the end of the
I
day.
did
Did you
not
guys see
see
this
that.
follow-up just recently? I'll try to find an article and
No,
put
are
it in
you
the
talking
link,
about the
but
one here in Oldsmar,
yeah,
like in Tampa, where I live?
yeah. It turns out there was a mistake made, and they
Oh,
concocted the story of the threat actor. I got this. Maybe I didn't get this from a public source, but I'll double check and see if I can find something on it. But I believe
Wow.
you'll find the news to be coming out that this threat
okay.
actor actually did it internally and then made up the whole story of
Covered
the
it
other
up.
piece to cover it up. Yeah, I may be wrong. I'll find
Jeez.
that. I just heard this
That's
recently from
wild.
somebody. So
We'll have to see if
yeah,
that comes to
interesting. But
fruition.
yeah,
That would be
but
a new
sorry,
one.
tangential. Yeah, maybe I'll lose my newsman's card if I'm wrong on this one. I suppose, but it hasn't been a validated source. But the point is, you're going to continue to see pivots because threat actors are going to be threat actors. And
Right.
when it comes to it, Tom Lawrence tapped into this yesterday from a dark reading, or I can't remember which one it was he was listening to, but he says, listen, you hear this guy as an access broker talking about the reason he went to crime, right? And the reason that sometimes there's socioeconomic and forces that are at play there that create that. And that demand doesn't just go away overnight. I'm still going to feed my family. I'm still going to do what's necessary to meet the government, the entity that's asking me to. And when you start getting into that world, like, there is a push that it will continue to pivot, and you will
Well, it's
continue
like
to
any
see
other kind of
new
crime.
methods.
I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you look at a lot of different classes of criminal, a lot of them find that life out of some level of downturn in their luck or desperation or some unfortunate scenario. It doesn't magically change because it's now harder to do the crime, right? And I
right,
think that's something
right.
we all have to be cognizant of. And we're seeing double extortion, frankly, get more brutal. There was the incident
Explain
with the
double extortion for people that don't know, right? Let's
fair
talk
double
about that. It's
extortion.
just a
So
marketing term to
the
some
first
extent, but let's
extortion
explain it.
is the ransomware, traditional ransomware, ransom note, some level of encryption
Yep.
applied to your docs, send Bitcoin here. Well,
Your
then when we
HVAC's
started,
locked out, your machine
right,
won't work, those
right,
things.
when
Yeah,
we
yeah.
started getting good at backups and ways to restore beyond that, well, we stopped having to pay that, right? If we use a great backup product like a Datto or something like that, restore everything, make sure we eradicate our threat actor, and we move on with our life. The double piece of that and what's been added over the last few years is before I do the encryption piece, I steal all the data I can get, which can be a significant amount, right? It can be,
Yep.
maybe a couple gigs, could be terabytes. And now they're saying, not only is your data encrypted, I have my own copy of it, and if you don't pay, we're going to release. And now they're coming through with that in a big way. Shout out to QT. They're coming through with that in a big way. They're genuinely releasing the data. And recently, I believe this was the Canadian hospital system incident. It was very unfortunate because they started releasing treatment photos of cancer patients and mental health therapeutic notes. So it's really a rise in sort of the level of criminality and sort of heartlessness in this. So we have to be cognizant of that when we're dealing with ransomware incidents. And for me, that's kind of the one downside of potentially not being able to pay ransoms anymore. Obviously, we don't want to fund those
And
criminal entities, but that
yeah, and
flip
Dom,
side could be tough.
they're seizing on, to your point on that, they're seizing on all of these state privacy regulations that we have in place, which I think
Hmm.
we all applaud, right? Like we need to have more of
Right.
that in place. And it's good to say, like, hey, if there's a breach and disclosure of your information through a cyber event or anything else, you've got to notify, and there can be fines if you don't. Like, I think we all agree
Right.
that's probably good stuff to force people into like protecting information. The problem
Right.
comes in, of course, when bad guys see the same thing and they say, well, that's blood in the water for me, because now I can
Right.
leverage those things against you to say, if you don't pay, I'm going to release it and make it a huge nightmare for you on top. And this is why I would love to see a future iteration around all that privacy law to say things like, if you have had a cyber incident, you absolutely cannot pay a ransom to
Hmm.
prevent or deter the cyber criminal from releasing that information. I'd love to see that get attached in as like a 2.0 version of this legislation for that
That's a
same
Right.
big
reason.
one. That's a big one because what you're essentially doing, and I don't want to be too grandiose, is executing that company. When you think about it, if I can stop the release, therefore I can stop the privacy consideration that needs to happen potentially, then I don't have to pay for the privacy lawsuit that's coming from CCPA or NYA Shield or NYDFS or
Well, but
wherever it
see,
may
I
be
disagree
coming
with
from.
that though, because the breach has already occurred, right? Like
Yeah,
the
I
data
think
is
you're
already no
probably
longer
correct about
confidential.
that. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Once they have it. Yeah. Yeah. So, but the privacy implications get bigger once it comes into larger
Well,
double
and there was
extortion. Because one of the
one, I don't
things
know
you
if you
haven't
guys
talked
saw
about
this.
is,
Sorry, I don't know if you
yeah,
guys saw this. There was one where the threat actor reached out to the downstream
that's the one.
victims, the people whose
Yep.
information they stole from a company, and said, "Hey,
Stop
we
reading my
stole your
playbook.
information from whoever it
Yep.
was, right? You should call them and
Yeah.
tell them to pay us." This is the
Yeah,
craziest
because we're going to
story.
release your therapy notes. Yeah, I think it was a
Yeah, it's
therapy session,
nuts.
and they were going to release the notes of, I want to kill my mom. I don't know how to feel. Like, could you imagine that being pressured
Oh my
against one of
god,
your
dude.
patients from that perspective?
Yeah.
That's double extortion, right? Like, it's that finding other ways to make this so egregiously bad you only
It
have one
makes it
decision to
very
make, and that's to
human
pay me.
in a terrifying way, right?
Yeah,
It takes the level of criminal for me and just it really ratchets it up. But I do
yeah,
agree, Wes, with saying thou shalt not pay the ransom, right? I think it
agreed.
creates a little bit of turmoil and chaos, which everyone is afraid of at first. But I think long term, it just stops being profitable to do this, right?
Yeah, and it's
So
easier to
here's another
say than to
question for you
do.
guys.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think about this. You guys remember a year or two ago, we saw the Treasury Department and FinCEN, the group that does
OFAC
financial
list,
crimes
yeah,
enforcement. Yeah, and the OFAC
Yeah.
list, which don't ding me, it's Office of Foreign Assets and Controls. There we go.
yep, it
And
That's
what
is.
it.
that
There's your
group
ding. Yep,
is,
you get it.
they basically put out a notice to say, look, yeah, we got to dodge that one. They basically put out a notice to say, we're not adding new law, we're just reminding you, if you pay somebody
Yeah,
on this foreign asset list that's a known terrorist, known bad guy, we're coming
yeah,
after you. Do you think that there's going to be a day where someone has made example of that? Because that came and hit the
yes,
press, it was all a buzz, and
Yeah.
then
yes,
nothing happened. You wonder
yeah.
if one day they're
There,
going to come down and bring the hammer on somebody.
the squishiness of that has always been, Wes, and you know this better than me, the attribution of that payment wallet to a threat actor on the OFAC list, right? That's the sticky part of that. And you had so much funds washing and capability of anonymous currencies like Monero, things like that create that capability. That there's always going to be some wiggle room. But I agree, you're going to find one dead to rights where the wallet address was blatantly on the OFAC list, some run-of-the-mill, DFIR or digital forensics and incident response person is going to be responding and not checking OFAC list, and they will absolutely pay a terrorist on the OFAC list. Like, to demystify this, what's the OFAC list? When we talk about putting sanctions on someone, that means we can't pay money to them. They can't bring money in. They are on a persona non grata, not welcome in this country from a monetary
Like
perspective.
Russia's on the
And so when you
OFAC
think
list,
about
right? Is
that,
the
that's
easiest
the OFAC
example to
list.
talk about
Yeah,
what
yeah.
is. Yeah.
Who's that?
Russia. Like the country
Yeah,
of
Russia's on
Russia and
OFAC.
several of its people are on, and thou
A
shalt not
list of, you
exchange money
cannot
with the
send
United
assets.
States. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we place those sanctions, that's where that list is. And so I think the wiggle room is getting more and more less wiggly, right, Wes? I think you're seeing where
Mhm.
we're getting better attribution. We can track payment wallet addresses to known, at least entities and actors better. And the systems are being walked through. We see DOJ doing it all last year, right? The Department of Justice had a lot of wins in that department. So I think, yes, Wes, I think you'll see somebody be made example of saying, you aided and abetted a terrorist. You paid someone on the Office of Foreign Assets Control list that you should not have paid, and you're going to be made an example of in the State Department, and it's a federal crime, right? And so when I was a banker, and you were too, especially after 9/11, right, and the Bank Secrecy Act and the things that came in the Patriot Act, we had SARS, we had suspicious activity reports, we started to have the Know Your Customer rules, we started to have the things. I did use SARS, so suspicious activity report, that's a ding. But the point is we started to have those things come into play. So
You
I
guys
do
didn't know
believe
you were
you'll
going to
make
learn
an
baking
exemplary
tips
case. Yeah, this
when
is
you
a
came to
bank
the
day
gate
today, isn't
today.
it? We can get into LIBOR, which is the London interbank offering rate. We can get into all kinds of fun stuff, right?
That
Interbank
one I did
offering
not
rate.
know. I will say,
Yeah, yeah.
I did not know. Hey, here's another one for
Uh,
you. Now that you've got my brain going on this, Matt, here's another one for you. I want to hear what you guys' take on. So in the insurance world, we talk about these like systemic risks that we have to the market.
mhm.
For example, like a big
Oh,
hurricane
I know where you're going.
smacking Fort
Yep.
Myers, and then that has systemic effects into the cost of insurance because it's in the billions of dollars, and it really it drastically changes everything. To date, to date, we have never had a systemic cyber event. Never.
We have not.
There's
We
never
have
been one.
not.
Even
No.
the
Yeah.
big event that happened a
Even
couple of years
Kaseya,
ago inside our
SolarWinds.
industry,
Yeah, no,
yep,
agreed.
still has not had that happen. So you also have to wonder that what do we always say is we're realists here. It's a question of if, not
Yeah,
when. So when that
right.
huge systemic billion-dollar plus cyber event does occur, what does that change to
Oof.
federal, state legislation, cyber insurance? I think we have
I
drastic changes all of a sudden.
I
Wow.
I bet it depends on when it happens in our maturity curve, is a first statement. But I would say that if this were to take on a Hurricane Ivan or Hurricane Katrina type proportion in the South, you do see certain places where they won't be insured. Well, what is that? That's defined as the national floodplain, the national floodplain insurance over the 100-year high water mark. And so when you start seeing that, they defined off sections, and this is why I'm going here, of property that they would not be able to insure as a hurricane comes through this path, right? They said, I cannot, right? My house in Gulf Breeze was 100% underneath the national floodplain, and I had to buy insurance from NFIP, from the National Floodplain Insurance from the federal government. And that's what they did. They federalized it, and they said, hey, look, we'll take on this systemic risk because it's too big for any industry to absorb from a capitalism perspective. But I think the challenge is the way we'll find this likely is it'll happen first before we have an FIP, which is probably likely the way that went. I didn't dig into the beginning of that legislature, but I think you'll have a point where a bailout must occur because of a large enough loss that is so systemic and so non-restorable that we have to continue business and we cannot lose that large part of our gross
It'll be a
domestic production,
while.
right? So we fund
It'll
it.
be a too big to
Yeah.
fail case, right? Because ransomware and cyber
Yes.
incidents,
Yeah.
it's very hard for it to be systemic. We're going through this in Colorado right now. There's a lot of mountain areas where home insurers are refusing to insure because of the rise in wildfires, or the premiums are out of control, and they're actually proposing an insurer of last resort that's state run here to
Yeah.
compensate for that. But I think if you take an example, if you look at the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, well, all of the TRICARE, the military healthcare claims, are handled by one insurer there, right? Imagine that scale of an attack where that was brought down. You're
Sure.
talking about
Or
hundreds
let's
of
say
thousands of
1.4
people
million
under public care.
attorneys. It's,
Well,
anyways.
fair, but court can still happen, right? So I wouldn't even call that
Yes, true.
systemic. That's just
That's true. It's
just
not systemic.
unfortunate.
Yeah. I'm being catty.
But if we knock out a major portion of some critical function, healthcare, finances, or what have you, or, let's say we can't wire money for an hour even, right? Like I think for
Yeah.
me that would be a systemic event where it impacts so many people that some sort of like receivership thing happens, because you're right. I don't think national insurance exists by that phase.
Let alone, what are you going to do? Roll in the cyber response trucks now? Like, are you going to just assume that since power's down systemically, and let alone what that would do to a national point? And
Right.
back to your real original point, Wes. Yeah, I think it would change things quite drastically and in varying ways depending on when in our maturity curve this happens, right? In the sense that you would have the initial response of we have to save the economy, and you would have the other response of how the hell do we have it like this? And I'll tell you, I'm shocked when I look at, and I won't name any vendors specifically, but I'll also name that it's all vendors. I don't think I'd give anybody a pass on this. People that build product, their internal shoes out of a cobbler are crappy, right? And you see this where the actual protections in place and all of that, there needs to be a barrier to entry. There needs to be a standard. And I think that you might see out of this, depending on when it happens, legislation of regulatory bodies of our world, bare minimum requirements and standards for bank funding, small business development loan association, bare minimum requirements for SSPs and system security plans, things that start to actually give real meaningful, hey, Matt, did you build your house on stilts? Well, if so, your NFIP rate went down by 42% because you happen to have 12-foot poles that stick your house out of the ground, right? Welcome to Florida. Right. And so you start getting into this world where compensating things will be put in place. I genuinely believe that, Wes. I want to say record Matt Lee as a hard yes. If we ever have a billion, or, I would probably say it's more trillion, but if we ever had a single trillion systemic event, which human life and suffering and loss were a byproduct of that, you can mark my words, we will have a regulatory body within years, or a year for sure, in my mind. So if it ever comes true, I'll say I'm sorry for betting on that, but that's the reality.
But I think I hope that we build some layer of that before the systemic event. It will occur, right? It's the whole question of like the Yellowstone, right? Yeah, someday it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah,
but
that's future me's
only
problem. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, exactly. Well, we can only hope that we do the work today, be in a position to survive that without the full-blown panic, of the federal government and of state governments and of private bodies trying to muddle through, right? It would be my hope that we can get to a point where we have some level of federal cyber resilience for that.
And insurance has done more for that in 2 years. Insurance and COVID have done more for that in 2 years than we've done in the previous 20, especially at the SMB MSP focusing space, right? More drastic change. and which has put a lot of stress on our industry, right, Wes? And it really speaks towards empath. I mean, I'll give you a little plug here: is that you're creating tons of stress because the
Appreciate it.
nomenclatural increase has been a billionfold, right? And just look at the number of dings we've gotten in our show since we started tracking it, right? Like, there's just so much to learn.
I
So,
think only
Wes, why
one of
don't
them
you
was
close us out
technical
on that
too.
thought of how this changes as we go forward from an empathy and understanding of bringing people into the fold market conversation?
I think it's a wonderful way to close, Matt. I do think, how do we bring all of this home for those that are non-technical? And,
Right.
obviously a lot of it comes back to the wallet, right? It really does. The reason cyber insurance has had the effect that it's had so drastically in the past 18 months is specifically because of that. It directly impacts business risk. It impacts, how do I deal with all of those issues that come back to, how does this affect my business's ability to scale and survive and thrive in the future? And if we're
Yep.
not tying these things back in those ways, we're missing those elements that we've critically got to have. So I really appreciate you asked that, because it does come back to making sure that non-technical decision makers understand this and have the read in and the buy in to it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Wes, I can't thank you enough. I mean, you're always
Oh,
smarter than me, better
guys,
looking, all the things. It
no,
just sucks, but I still
no,
love
no,
having
no.
you around. So thanks for being here, buddy. Dom, why don't you
Seriously,
close
Wes,
us
thanks
out
so
and
much
do
for
all the
coming.
all the follow-uppy things?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming, Wes. It's great to have you on the show again. I hope to have you on the show again uh, before long. That's our show for the week. We're thrilled to have you with us. Make sure, like I said at the top of the show, you're really going to want to join us next week. We're really going to get special with this one. We have Andrew Morgan and Rob Ray joining us. We're going to spend the majority of that show talking about Beyond and the new security track coming up at Beyond, and how it's really going to help you operationalize a lot of what we spend our Fridays talking about. Don't forget to catch all the other Pax8 live shows. You've got Technically Unraveled with Kristen Fairmock. You've got Academy Live with Rex and team. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that fun algorithmy stuff. And we will catch you next week.